Bonjour tout le monde. Welcome to your first lesson. This is week one material. So this is going to start with the preliminary chapter. So you can, like I said, follow along with the syllabus to figure out exactly what sections we'll be going over. But this is basically the very first section in the entire book. So with each video, we're going to start off with these learning objectives. It's basically giving you an idea of what to expect from the video, as well as what you should feel comfortable doing by the end of the video. So by the end of this video, students will be able to introduce themselves and others in French, participate in small talk using appropriate phrases, identify situations in which the formal and informal register should be used, and finally, pose yes or no questions. Okay, let's get started. C'est parti. Je m'appelle Monsieur Lamb. So here, as you've probably guessed, this is essentially a translation for my name is, but in French we say I call myself or you call yourself. So there's a lot of information in this slide, but first I'll draw your attention to obviously the infinitive. We have s'appeler. So this is a reflexive verb, but you don't need to worry about that. All that you need to know is essentially memorize these as sort of chunks. So, je m'appelle. As we can see, je means I. So all of these words that are in bold and underlined, these are subject pronouns. And they all have some sort of correspondent in English, so we'll go through them. But first, we have the first person singular. We have je m'appelle. Next, tu t'appelles. So notice, even though we have that S there, it's not pronounced. In French, a lot of the final consonants are not pronounced. So, je m'appelle, tu t'appelles. They sound the exact same at the end of the word. But tu means you, but you singular. So if I'm just talking to my brother, for example, I could say tu t'appelles Tony. Next, we have il, elle, on s'appelle. So il would be the masculine third person singular pronoun. We have elle would be the feminine third person singular, and we have on, which is often translated either as one. So it can be sort of impersonal, like one does this, but also it's oftentimes used to mean we. So if, even though it's a singular pronoun, oftentimes they'll say on s'appelle, and that would mean we. So then we have nous nous appelons. Nous means we, so this is the first person plural. So we are called. Vous vous appelez. This one also means you, and it can take on two meanings. It can either be you for if I'm talking to a group of people, so like a large group, all of your names are, maybe everybody's name in the room is Ryan. Vous vous appelez tous Ryan. And it can also be used for the formal register, and we'll look at that in just a moment. And then finally, we have il and elle s'appelle. So notice here that all of the verb endings that are singular and the third person plural, they're all pronounced the same. So whether it's e, es, or ent, it always is appel. So that makes pronunciation a lot easier. You don't have to add in any other sounds. Mais maintenant, comment t'appelles-tu? So I want you to take a moment here and pause the video. You can practice this, practice the pronunciation. I encourage you to always practice. If you need to pause the video, please do so. It's going to help your pronunciation if you listen to what I say and you try to repeat it yourself. But here I'm asking you a question, and I'd like you to tell me what your name is. Comment t'appelles-tu? Moi, par exemple, je m'appelle Monsieur Lamb. Okay, so I mentioned this earlier, where we have the formal and informal register. This is very important in French culture. It's important to always use the correct register depending on the situation. There's different there are different conventions that you'll have to remember, but here we're going to look at a couple of examples. So on the top, you can see c'est une situation formelle. They look like they're in a business meeting. They're all wearing ties at least, or they're wearing formal dress. So there's probably like a professional situation. Therefore, it's formal. So some greetings here. Bonjour, obviously hello. And comment vous appelez-vous? So if you're meeting a colleague for the first time, you're certainly going to want to use the formal register here. And in that case, you'll use the vous form. So this is the same as the second person plural. Next, we have the familiar or the informal situation. C'est une situation informelle. So here you can see they're at a party. This is obviously an informal situation, so they'll use informal greetings. You can say bonjour, that can be both formal and informal, but salut is definitely more familiar. And then we have a couple of example questions here. Comment t'appelles-tu? Comment tu t'appelles? So in that first one, we have the inversion, which is obviously more formal. And in spoken, less formal situations, you can just use upward intonation, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But take a moment here and practice some pronunciation. We have bonjour. Comment vous appelez-vous? Salut. Comment t'appelles-tu? Et comment tu t'appelles? So, these are obviously greetings, and when you're first meeting somebody, these are examples of things that you would say. Ensuite, c'est le verbe aller. Something that we haven't yet seen, but is important when you're first meeting somebody or you're asking somebody how they're doing. Ça va? Ça va? This means how's it going, quite literally. Or literally it's going, question mark. So once again, we have the same subject pronouns, but this is how we conjugate the verb aller, meaning to go. So, je vais. Tu vas. Il va. On va. Nous allons. Vous allez. Elles vont. So once again, I want you to pay close attention to the pronunciation here. In that to form, the second person singular, we have another S that's silent. So the tu and the il, elle, on form are pronounced the exact same. Tu vas, il va. And same with that actually all of the S's here. They're not pronounced. Je vais, nous allons. Yeah, just be careful with those. But here's a question for you. Ça va? Moi, oui, ça va. Okay, so again, we have to worry about the formality here. So if we're in a formal situation and we want to ask somebody how they're doing, we might say, comment allez-vous? And in familiar or informal situations, we have, comment vas-tu? Ça va? Ou, comment ça va? So probably, obviously, there's really only one choice in that formal option, but as far as the informal options go, ça va is definitely the most common of all of them. But yeah, again, here we'll use the to form in informal or familiar situations, and the vous form in formal situations. Okay, now we have a quick note on the culture. C'est un mot sur la culture. On a les salutations. Yeah, I should say salutation. Okay, but in in the French-speaking world, when people first meet each other, it is customary for them to shake hands regardless of their age or gender. When when friends or family greet each other, men generally shake hands with each other, while women kiss each other on the cheek. Men will kiss female family members and female friends on the cheek. The number of kisses, les bises, varies depending on the region and other factors, and it is difficult to anticipate. Two kisses, one on each cheek, is the most common combination throughout most of France. 3 kisses are often exchanged in Paris and Provence, or between close friends. 4 kisses are reportedly exchanged in Nantes, or as a sign of affection between dearest of friends or family members. However, no matter how many number of kisses are exchanged, the French always start with the right cheek. So if you ever plan on going to France, it's worthwhile to take a look at where you're going and how many kisses you should expect to give somebody on each cheek, because it can be a little bit awkward in your first time. So do you come from a culture where people greet each other with kisses on the cheek? I can tell you, when I first moved to France, it was definitely a culture shock. It's not something that I was used to, and I had to remember always start on the right side. Ok. Ensuite, les réponses. So for the question, comment ça va? Some appropriate responses. Je vais bien. It's going well, or I'm going well. Ça va ou ça va bien. So both of those, ça va can be both a question and a response, and you can say, somebody can ask you ça va, and you can just say ça va, meaning it's going well. Oui, ça va, yes, it's going well. Ou pas mal, not bad. Another appropriate response might be et toi ou et vous. So if somebody asks you comment ça va, je vais bien. Et toi? And depending on the situation, if it's a formal situation, you might say et vous. So in response to the je m'appelle, comment t'appelles-tu? Je m'appelle Andrew. And then they might say enchanté, nice to meet you. Notice the E in the parentheses here. So if I were a female, I would write the E. Since I'm male, I don't write the E, but either way, they're pronounced the same. Enchanté, enchanté. They are pronounced exactly the same. This is only something you have to worry about when it's written. Une autre, ravi de faire votre connaissance. So this is formal. Here we have votre connaissance. That's the vous form. So we'll talk more about this later. This is right now. You're just learning these things as a chunk. Another example response might be ravi de faire ta connaissance. So this would be informal. So the difference there is votre et ta. Ok, maintenant on a une conversation. Ça, c'est une conversation dans une situation formelle. So here I'm going to show you an example conversation. You can see that these two gentlemen are wearing collared shirts. They're definitely in a formal situation. So we'll start here. Bonjour. Bonjour. Comment vous appelez-vous? Je m'appelle Olivier. Et vous? Je m'appelle Thomas. Ravi de faire votre connaissance. Enchanté. Comment allez-vous? Je vais bien. Et vous? Oui, je vais bien, merci. And then that seems to be the end of the question, or the end of the conversation. So, again, we can see that we're using the vous form. That only affects when we're addressing somebody. So obviously they'll still use je. Nothing changes about that. The only thing that changes when you're directly addressing somebody, whether you're using the tu or vous. Ensuite, c'est une conversation dans une situation informelle. So again, here we have an informal situation. These are seemingly classmates or students at least. So here we have, I'll go ahead and read the conversation to you. Salut, bonjour, comment t'appelles-tu? Je m'appelle Lucie. Et toi? Je m'appelle Eva. Ravi de, ravi de faire ta connaissance. Enchanté. Ça va? Ça va bien. Et toi? Oui, ça va, merci. So again, we can see the difference there. We have the tu form rather than the vous form, and we're using the more informal questions like ça va, oui, ça va bien. So again, these are just a couple of examples of conversations that are just sort of like small talk. Ok, ensuite, les salutations et valédictions. So here we have the basically hellos and goodbyes. So we have bonjour et bonsoir. Ils sont les salutations. When we're seeing somebody for the first time, we might say hello or bonjour, bonsoir. The difference here is the time of day. So anytime before about 6 p.m., it's bonjour. Anytime after 6 p.m., it's bonsoir. And then as we're leaving, we might say au revoir, au revoir, bonne journée, bonne soirée, ou bonne nuit. So au revoir, that works any time of the day, doesn't matter when. However, the last three depend on the time of day. So bonne journée, again, this would be anytime before about 6 p.m. Bonne soirée, anytime after 6 p.m. And bonne nuit is usually when you're going home or you're going to bed. So that's like the very end of the night. Okay, now we have some situations, and I want you to guess if these situations are formal or informal. Est-ce qu'ils sont les situations formelles ou informelles? Ok, on est dans un entretien. Un entretien. This is an interview. So, what do you think? C'est une situation formelle. So in this case, everybody in this situation will be using the vous form. They're all, when they greet each other, they'll say bonjour, comment allez-vous? Or, comment vous appelez-vous? Those are all examples of formal register. Ensuite, dans une fête, a party. Ça, c'est une situation informelle. So when we're seeing somebody in the evening, I say bonsoir, ça va? So again, this is informal. Comment vas-tu? Ensuite, dans le bureau de votre professeur. So here we have the office of your professor or your teacher. So this one is tricky. This is definitely a formal situation, but you'll definitely always, the student should always be addressing the professor as vous, and the professor might address you then as a tu. And that's more of a hierarchical difference. So obviously you have the teacher that's in power, and they might then address you as tu. It's not something you should be offended by. It's just the way that it is. est dans la salle de classe, in the classroom. So here, this one depends. If you're talking amongst classmates, you'll always use the informal. So if you're talking to anybody, even if you don't know them, if they're about your same age, you'll always use the to form. Once again, though, when you're talking to the professor, you address them with vous, so that would be formal. Ok. Je suis prof de français. Je suis prof de français. I am a French professor. So here we have yet another verb. These are all irregular, by the way. We'll see regular verbs that aren't so, confusing looking, but the three verbs that you've seen so far all have some sort of irregularity. But they are all very important verbs, so they're something that you just have to memorize. So here we have the verb to be, être. So the examples here, we have once again all the same pronouns. We have je suis, I am. Tu es, elle est. Nous sommes. Vous êtes. Ils sont. So once again, we have these pesky ending consonants that are not pronounced. So none of these consonants are pronounced actually in these situations at least. Je suis, tu es, il est, nous sommes, vous êtes, elles sont. So just be careful with those, especially with the tu and the il, elle, on form. We definitely want to make sure that those are pronounced the exact same. It's not est, it's a. It's not s, it's a. Okay. And when you're meeting somebody, might be interesting to know where they're from. Les origines. So here we can use this with the verb être. Par exemple, je suis américain. So here in that case, we'll use these are all actually adjectives, so we can just use them directly after, like I am this. So we have some examples here. I'm not sure where you all are from, but I assume that many of you are American, so you'll probably use that, but you can of course use this to describe other people as well. So we have français ou française. So here, if it depends on if the person is male or female. So français is the one without the e. Française is the one with the e. Adding an e in these situations makes it feminine. Then we have américain ou américaine. So here again, the e makes us pronounce that final consonant. Here we have canadien ou canadienne. So here we add more than just an e, we actually double that last consonant. But again, it makes us pronounce it as well. Anglais, anglaise. So this one is English, so from England. Mexicain ou mexicaine. Obviously Mexican. Chinois, chinoise, Chinese. Belge. So in this case, we have no feminine or masculine. It doesn't matter. Everybody is Belge. Japonais, japonaise. Japanese, obviously. Oh, Belge is Belgian. Russe, Russian. This is another one that doesn't change from masculine to feminine. We have Indien, Indienne. Algérien, Algérienne. Indian, Algerian. Marocain, Marocaine, Moroccan. And Allemand, Allemande. That would be German. Okay, so we know the verb here, être. So one question that you might ask somebody, d'où êtes-vous? So in this case, where are you from? D'où es-tu? Where are you from? So again, we have the same question. One's formal, one's informal, or we could just be asking a group of people. So if we're asking maybe a group of international students, d'où êtes-vous? Even if it's not an informal situation, it still also means where are y'all from? And then a good response to that is je suis de. So you can say the country, or you can say use one of these adjectives that we just learned. So, like I said, je suis américain. So, d'où êtes-vous? Hopefully, you took the time to practice and tell me to the screen at least where you're from. Okay, then I want to talk a little bit about questions here. So, you've heard me ask a few questions, but it's important to know different ways of forming questions, essentially. So, to ask a yes or no question in French, you can make a statement and raise the pitch of your voice at the end. So, this is called rising intonation. And it's used, obviously, in spoken because you can't rise the intonation in written, but this is used oftentimes. We do it a lot in English, too, where we rise the end of the sentence. So, this is obviously more informal, but we can say, Pauline est étudiante. So here, if I said that without the rising intonation, it would be a statement. Pauline est étudiante, meaning Pauline is a student. But here I'm asking, Pauline's a student? Oui, Pauline est étudiante. Then we have another way of posing a yes or no question, and this is a bit more formal. This is something that you'll use in formal situations. So you can also place est-ce que. So practice pronouncing that with me. Est-ce que. And then if it's preceding a vowel sound, we would use est-ce que with that apostrophe, and we take away the E, and then we'll basically contract them. So in front of a statement. So here we've got often also it's important to note that your voice will probably end up rising with these at the ends of these questions, but it's not ambiguous. If you use esca, they'll know it's a question, even if you don't rise your intonation at the end. So, est-ce qu'elle est de Chicago? So here, is she from Chicago? Here, since elle, that begins with a vowel sound, we'll use that QU apostrophe. Then la réponse, non, elle est de Morgantown. Okay, so here we have the final activity that I'm going to ask you to do. On a les personnes célèbres, so famous people. Think of 5 celebrities from 5 different countries. So write 5 phrases using être. So if you don't know the country in French, you can ask me, or probably the easier option would be to look on word reference. I highly recommend you bookmark that. That's a hugely useful website that's going to help you translate words. It gives you also a lot of context too. Using something like Google Translate, it doesn't give you context. It might give you something that is translated incorrectly, but at least with word reference, they'll give you sort of examples of how to use it. So it's very, very useful. Okay, hopefully you wrote some sentences. Quelques exemples. Gérard Depardieu est français. So he's a famous French actor. Aya Nakamura est malienne. She's a famous French singer. Well, she sings in French, but she is from Mali. Elle est malienne. Okay, so that will wrap things up. Please let me know if you have any questions. Go ahead and send me an email. I'm more than happy to respond at any point. But now it's time for you to go to the discussion board and try and work on that, as well as work on your MindTap homework. If you also need some more explanation, the book does a good job of explaining what I've just explained to you. If maybe you prefer to read it, that's also a good idea as well. Au revoir, bonne journée ou bonne soirée. I guess it depends on what time you're watching this. Mais au revoir.